The history of the relationship between the United States and the Soviet Union. The relationship between the United States and the Soviet Union was centered around the struggle for world domination, which led to the great tension and competition between the two countries. This fight for superiority between the two powers lasted for 3 decades, starting during World War II, 1935 to 1945. Although the US and the Soviet Union formed an alliance during World War II based on the common goal of defeating Nazi Germany, the Soviets' anti-democratic policy toward Eastern Europe created tension between the US and the Soviet Union before World War II ended. The next 30 years after World War II, the US and the Soviet Union stayed away from each other while they were in a missile and a nuclear arms race. This period marked the Cold War between the two superpowers. The US was advised to follow a policy of containment toward the Soviet Union, meaning that communism needed to be contained and isolated, or it would spread to neighboring countries. The dropping off of its first atomic bomb by the Soviet Union in 1949 came to a great shock to the US because they were not expecting the Soviets to have knowledge in nuclear weapons so soon. After the American atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which put an end to World War II, the Soviets expanded its nuclear weapons research facilities, military reactors, and employed many scientists, including atomic spies, who successfully acquired information of the American nuclear weapon developments. In 1949, the possibility of further communist expansion promoted the US and 11 other Western nations to form the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, to stop communism from spreading into war-torn Western Europe. The Soviet Union and other communist countries in Eastern Europe founded a rival alliance, the Warsaw Pact, in 1955. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first man-made object to orbit the Earth. The US thought they were ahead of the Soviets in technology and science. They were surprised by Sputnik. In response, the US increased their efforts in science and overall space race. Tensions between the US and the Soviets continued to exist until the collapse of the Soviet Union in December of 1991, which divided the country into 15 separate countries, Russia being the biggest one. The US followed a very smart tactic by helping the former Soviet Union to eliminate, transport, and store its extra nuclear weapons. The US and Russia cooperated in space missions such as jointly built International Space Station. Although the US relationship with Russia was by far much better than the relationship with the Soviet Union, tensions still exist between the two countries after the collapse of the communist regime. In 2002, President Bush withdrew from the anti-ballistic missile treaty signed by the US and the Soviet Union in 1972. Russia was strongly against the US invading Iraq the following year, and the US supporting Kosovo's independence in 2008. Russia also strongly protested against US plan to build an anti-ballistic missile defense system in Poland in 2007. The Russia-Georgia crisis in 2008 also contributed to the tension between the US and Russia. Under President administration, the US is in good terms with Russia. The US had never been so threatened by any other country than the Soviet Union. If it weren't for the history of the Soviets, the US would never be the country it is today.